and welcome back to On The Grid Podcast, episode 5, season 3. We're back again after a very eventful Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that saw Sergio Perez storm to victory like a madman. The street circuit genius is back at it again. I'm your host, Adrian Kita. Joining me once again is my lovely co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, first and foremost, how are you, mate?
Very good. A little bit disappointed after the race yesterday, but it was nice to see Checo get the win. But looking forward to the podcast.
And joining us, special guest, first guest of the season, Kathrin Dick. How are you, Kathrin?
Well, first off, I'm very, very honoured to be your first guest of the season. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, let's go right into it.
So, first and foremost, I think, Ethan, is it a good time to have an FIA rant before we begin qualifying?
There's always a good time for an FIA rant. Like, they don't help themselves. They've come under a lot of slack over the last couple of years. And then this is just another example of the FIA just not having a clue. So let's start off in chronological order with the Lance Stroll DNF. He's off the track. There's no need for a full safety car. If you want to play a little bit cautious, you want to just make sure there's no risk of anything. VS6, that's the maximum you need. By the time, I think by the time like the first five in order got behind the safety car, joined up behind the safety car, Stroll's car was already cleared. You know that it. I'll save the second part of the rant for later on. But yeah, that didn't need to be a safety car. It made for a bit more of an interesting race, but yeah, no safety car needed.
You got something off your chest now. Something, yeah. Okay, we're good. Okay, let's jump straight into qualifying. Q1, top 3: Verstappen, Perez, Alonso. I don't think much explanation needed there. Very good from the 2 Red Bulls, and Alonso, of course, he's been rampant. But looking at the bottom 5, the first outlier there is Lando Norris. McLaren, once again, shocker. Kathrin, I'm going to go to you on McLaren. Obviously, we saw in Bahrain their struggles, and their struggles kind of continued in qualifying in Q1 with Lando being the outlier. Piastri did very well, but Lando couldn't get himself into Q2, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just don't know what's happening at the minute with McLaren. They're really struggling with the start of the season, and I suppose, with Lando Norris, I just don't know how he isn't doing what potentially Oscar Piastri has done. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how this continues for the rest of the season, given the fact that the car is so bad. But hopefully they can improve with some upgrades. But yeah, it's not looking good for Lando Norris, and this was not the best start to his weekend.
And Ethan, we were mentioning Lando Norris in our last episode about potentially a move away. Do you think that it's due? Because that McLaren car, it's Lando's, I think, after this weekend especially, he's putting the help me sign out. Really, he's in desperate need of a move.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's not looking good for the first season. I will just like to give him a few more races. You know, they still did get that podium last season by Imola at McLaren with Norris, so we'll have to wait and see. But you can understand his frustration. You know, he's in a car that's not good enough. He's used to fighting in the front of the midfield. He wants to get podiums. He wants to get wins, and he's just pushed it too hard. He's just gone in too sharply to that final corner and just made a small error. But that's all it takes at this level.
And the other 4 cars were the 2 Williams of Sargent and Albon, with Tsunoda and De Vries also joining Norris in the bottom 5. Moving on to Q2, and another driver that was unexpected to come out of that session, Max Verstappen. A drive shaft issue there. Well, you can't really say anything else there. He had a problem with his car. He couldn't continue in qualifying. And yeah, it was essentially qualifying over, Kathrin, really, for Verstappen. But it was unfortunate. He was looking very good in Q1, and it didn't happen in Q2, and he was out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially with the fact that the drive shaft wasn't working, I think Red Bull are going to have a look at that and see what happens. But I'm not sure if they have to replace the engine or other components for that, for this particular qualifying, it was quite surprising to see him out so early, but I don't think it was in anyone's mind that he couldn't necessarily do it from the position that he started in. But we'll get onto that a bit later.
Moving on to the two Haas's, I think Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg did a very, very good job for Haas. Obviously qualifying 11th and 13th respectively. Ethan, I predicted Hülkenberg to get into Q3 last episode, and he was inches away from doing so. Do you think that Nico Hülkenberg has the expectancy of reaching the dizzying heights in qualifying, but his race pace is lacking ever so slightly?
Yeah, it's going to be an intriguing one between Magnussen and Hülkenberg. They seem to be, well, obviously there was a big split in Bahrain, and then it seemed to be very close between them here, with Magnussen getting the edge in the race in terms of race pace, but Hülkenberg obviously doing better in qualifying. Just going back to Verstappen, and I'm going to get a little bit controversial here. He did have a first run in Q2, which he messed up. So I know, in the end he finished second. It's all well for him, but he's kind of got himself to blame that he put himself in that position to begin with. Because if he put in a good lap, he would have been safely through to Q3. Sorry, he would have been half second clear of the next quickest car, and he would have been safely through. But he made that mistake, and then he had that problem. So I'm not gonna sit here and say him too much. But he did make a mistake, and then he had that problem.
Sit on the fence a little bit, okay? More on the fence, please.
Getting controversial today.
Yeah, you're feeling very controversial, aren't you? Why are you in this sort of mood? Well, what's enraged this monster?
I think it's the anger at the FIA, to be honest. It's unleashed an angry side, but well, I'm sure we'll speak more about those people over there in a moment.
Moving to the final driver, I think we should outline in Q2, Valtteri Bottas. Only 14th for him. He's usually a consistent performer in qualifying. Do you think, Kathrin, that maybe this was kind of a one-off qualifying performance for Bottas? Alfa Romeo doing generally well in qualifying. Was it a one-off?
I'd like to think so. I mean, Valtteri Bottas is known to, as you say, be very consistent, and he's consistent with race pace as well normally. But yeah, this qualifying just didn't seem to work out for him, and I don't know if that's because of the track or anything else, but yeah, it is definitely a one-off, and I hope that we see him more higher up in the next few races.
Moving on to Q3, and your man, the street circuit genius, Sergio Perez, stormed to pole position ahead of Leclerc and Alonso. Obviously, Leclerc with a penalty after his control electronic change after last Grand Prix. Ethan, let's touch upon Sergio first. He's fantastic around street circuits. We can clearly identify that. He got pole position last year. He got pole position this year, and it put him in very good stead ahead of a race.
Yeah, definitely. With Verstappen having a problem, it kind of looked like gave Perez an opportunity to get pole and to kind of dominate that race and get it and pick up the win for Red Bull. He'd done the business, he'd done the job, put it on pole, not maybe by the margin that he should have. Leclerc was quite close. Obviously, he did have that penalty, and I think third place Alonso was sort of half a second back. But that could be a concern in future races with Leclerc in and around Perez. He does look like the only one that could challenge the Red Bulls, Leclerc. He done it in a little bit in Bahrain before he had that unfortunate retirement. But yeah, no, we'll have to wait and see. But a solid qualifying for Checo.
Yeah, touching upon Leclerc, obviously, resident Ferrari fan here, I'm going to keep my partial head on because it was actually very quite nice to see Leclerc qualify ahead of Alonso after Alonso got second place in Q2. I was kind of worrying a bit, but obviously the penalty hit Leclerc regardless, so he was going to start back way back in 12th anyway. But Leclerc second, Alonso third, Russell fourth. Moving on to you, Kathrin. George Russell. Again, Mercedes, there or thereabouts, qualifying in fourth. Hamilton down in eighth. George Russell qualifying very good.
Yeah, again, I mean, he was known at Williams as Mr. Saturday. He's got the consistency in qualifying. I think given the championship this season, he's a good contender for potentially P3 in the championship. It'll be really interesting to see what he does in the next few races with the qualifying, given some comments from his teammate, which we may go into a bit later. But yeah, really good qualifying performance for him. I think he's got the race pace and it worked out really well for him.
Moving on to P5 man, Carlos Sainz. Do you think, Ethan, that the split between the two Ferraris is a little bit too great? Leclerc, very good in qualifying. It's got to be said. Sainz dropping off the pace a little bit. Do you think that, obviously, Fred Vasseur said that they don't have a clear number one driver, but I think there's clearly dominance and ascendancy for Leclerc there.
Yeah, it was kind of, it's a little bit disappointing for Sainz, because at the start of last season, we were looking at this being sort of the pairing that seemed to be the closest matched on pace out of those top three teams. You know, Sainz obviously beat Leclerc in 2021, and you thought maybe he can kick on now, really stake his claim as, you know, being deserving the right to be fighting for wins at Ferrari. Hasn't quite worked out for him since, and I think this will be a slight concern moving forward, especially if Leclerc continues to have these engine issues. But I did see somebody see a few people say that, you know, this wouldn't be so much of the problem if they had the quickest car. You know, look at Red Bull. Verstappen is clearly a much better driver than Perez and a lot quicker, but it works for them. You know, Verstappen gets the wins and Perez picks up the podium, picks up second or third. So I think it's being heightened because Ferrari obviously are in a bit of a transitional period here. But yeah, no, it's definitely a battle to look through throughout the season.
Then we had Lance Stroll qualifying in 6th, Esteban Ocon, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri in 9th, and Pierre Gasly in 10th. I think we touch upon Oscar Piastri a little bit here. Rookie, second ever race in Formula One, qualifying into Q3 ahead of his teammate, more experienced teammate as well. Kathrin, it was kind of, I would kind of say it was a little bit daunting for Oscar, but he coped with it very well. Qualified 9th, started 8th, kind of unravelled a little bit in the race, but his Saturday went very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the problems that we saw with his car in Bahrain, you look at it and you sort of think, well, this was justified, and it was sort of karma coming back and making sure that he had a good try and give him the best weekend that he could possibly have. I do think that his qualifying pace around Jeddah was incredibly impressive, given the fact that the F2 cars are so much slower around Jeddah and the difference between the cars. Yeah, really, really impressive, and good signs for what's to come, hopefully.
Obviously, a two-time winner in Jeddah, I believe, in Formula 2 in 2021, during his title-winning campaign. But looking ahead of the race, we obviously saw a grid penalty to Leclerc, which relegated him down to 12th, which promoted Nico Hülkenberg into the top 10, and everybody else moved up a place, which saw obviously Perez start on pole position with Alonso on the front row, Russell and Sainz in 3rd and 4th, Stroll and Ocon on the 3rd row, Hamilton and Piastri on the 4th row, with Gasly and Hülkenberg on the 5th row, Zhou 11th, Leclerc 12th, Magnussen 13th, Bottas in 14th, Verstappen after his poor qualifying started 15th, Tsunoda in 16th, Albon in 17th, De Vries in 18th, Lando Norris in a lowly 19th, and Logan Sargent was allowed to race after he didn't set a competitive time, but he was allowed to race and started P20. Looking over the race, I think we look at it driver by driver. So we'll start off with our race winner, Sergio Perez. Ethan, obviously, Perez had a bit of a worrying start. Alonso overtook him, but he regained the race lead a lap or 2 laps later. Never looked back. Dominant win and a very good victory. 25 points in the bag.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, it was a little bit of a worry for him when Alonso obviously got past at the start. You may be thinking, oh, here we go. You know, is Perez, can Perez get the win here? Or is Alonso going to hold him off? He did get past him a few laps later. It just shows the pace differential between the Red Bull and every other car. But then I thought what was very impressive was his second stint. You know, he was under a lot of pressure from Verstappen and he held him off. Verstappen never got within 4 seconds of him. You know, that gap was consistent around 4 and 5 seconds. And then obviously Verstappen had a slight problem towards the end, which pegged them back a little bit. But yeah, no, it was a great result for Perez, and very almost took the championship lead if it wasn't for that last lap, fastest lap for Verstappen.
Great segue, moving on to Verstappen, who finished second, started 15th. I think we're accustomed to seeing Max Verstappen absolutely charge through the field from lower than 10th on the grid to finishing on the podium or even getting the race victory. But one thing that I caught very sour after the race, he wasn't happy. He wasn't content with not winning the race. Kathrin, a little bit of a rivalry there. Lewis x Nico days from Mercedes back in 2010s, 2016, I believe it was.
Yeah, I mean, them talking about the delta and being given different delta times just it made it so, I don't know, it just seems a bit fiery. And when you look at the team and the fact that they've had to replace drivers mid-season in pairings for Max, it's sort of, will this work out in long term? And will Checo always be okay with being number two to Max when obviously they have the same car? And you never know, Checo could challenge and it could be a Checo Max title fight. And will they let them fight, or will they just let Max have it in a sense? So yeah, no, it was really interesting. And a bit on Max Verstappen, it's the fact that I think before the race, Fernando Alonso gave an interview saying that Max would be in P2 by lap 25, and he sort of joked about it to a reporter as they walked onto the grid, and he indeed did that. So yeah, really good race for him, and yeah, definitely some fiery tension lining up in the Red Bull garage.
Moving on to the Centurion man of podiums, well, it could have not been after a 10-second time penalty, which was rescinded, and he got his podium back, but Fernando Alonso started second, finished third. Obviously, 100 podiums now up for Alonso. Very good race from him again. Consecutive podiums for Aston Martin and for Alonso. Ethan, here's your cue to have an FIA rant once again.
Lovely. Wow. Yeah, moving. So going back to what I was talking about the Stroll incident, about the safety car. So Alonso takes his 5-second penalty for the incorrect grip position in that pit stop, and then they adjudge that the rear jack has touched the car, and apparently you can't be touching the car at all in that 5 seconds. It's not the fact that, you know, they found this and then they gave him the penalty and then he could open up a 10-second gap to Russell with some Mercedes behind. It's the fact this happened 30 laps later. So I think it happened on lap 15, safety car. With about 5 laps to go, Mercedes get on the radio to George Russell and say, make sure you're within 5 seconds of Alonso at the end. We think he may have a penalty coming. I think it would be very unfair that if Alonso didn't have that penalty rescinded and got that podium in the end, because he has 30 laps. You know, 5 extra seconds over the course of 30 laps is nothing. It's a few tenths here. It's a few tenths every lap. And Alonso probably had a bit of pace in the bank. He was probably just coasting. Because the Mercedes didn't seem to have too good a pace on that second stint. It's just, so not only that, they have the podium celebration, and then half an hour after the race ends, that's when Alonso gets the penalty. After the podium's all done, you know, they still have plenty of time to look at the video, say, yep, he's interfered with the car, he's such a car, you're not allowed to do that, penalty. And then, what is it? It's sort of like 5 hours later, I think it was about 11 o'clock at night. They're starting to see a few Twitter notifications going around saying, oh, Alonso might get his penalty rescinded. And then we had to wait for another half an hour or an hour for the FIA to finally confirm Alonso got his 100th podium. I mean, he didn't seem too bothered but in the press conference, whether it was going to get taken away from him or not. But it's the FIA yet again hurting themselves, hurting their own reputations, and showing themselves not fit to run the sport. The people in charge are not to the level that we need for one of the biggest IPs on the planet. Forget sport, forget that. On the planet, in all forms of media, Formula One is one of the biggest IPs, and you need to have that show. You need to have the people in place that can look at it, not let half the race distance go by before finally thinking, oh, we should probably investigate that, and just run it efficiently, run it in the way it should be ran. So yeah, that's my rant done for today. Until next week.
Moving on to the two Mercedes drivers in P4 and P5. George Russell finishing 4th, Lewis Hamilton finishing a very respectable P5. I'm not going to ask you, Ethan, on regarding Mercedes for the first time in forever, I think. I'm going to ask Kathrin regarding Mercedes. George Russell, very good race. I don't think he had the pace to catch up the Aston Martins or the Red Bulls ahead. And Lewis Hamilton on the second stint on his mediums, a very good finishing in 5th. Very good points for Mercedes. I think all round, finally, they had a very good weekend.
Yeah. I mean, Lewis did a really, really good job, I think, and same with George. I think Mercedes had a good weekend if you ignore their rivals. I think it was a really good weekend for them. I think the comments afterwards made by Lewis sort of reminded me a bit of 2017 Lewis, regarding the fact that he said that he was like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to do with George's podium and whether he wasn't really happy, but like it wasn't really directly that. Don't quote me on that. But it sort of reminded me of 2017 Lewis, and yeah, it was a really, really good race, and yeah, should be interesting seeing how they progress this season.
Moving on to a team that didn't do very well. I think as a Ferrari fan, I'm not going to point it at myself. I'm going to move down to the Merc fan below me on the Zoom call, Ethan. 6th and 7th for Ferrari, 9th and 6th for Leclerc in 7th. Leclerc did very well to charge from 12th. I think Fred Vasseur at the start of the race wanted a podium from Sainz and at least a 5th place finish from Leclerc. Leclerc 2 places away, Sainz 3 places away. Healthy points for Ferrari, but it could have been a lot better.
Yeah, I don't think Vasseur was too unreasonable to expect that, to be honest. Sainz obviously starting 4th, didn't have a great start and fell behind Lance Stroll at the start. And then sort of from there was a bit anonymous. Obviously, he pitted a few laps after Stroll did, before the safety car. So he didn't make the overcut because the warm-up on the hards was not good at all. And then Leclerc, I think, was a little bit unfortunate. He had a great first stint on the softs. That was a bit of a risk by Ferrari, the only driver, I think, to start on the softs. But he made it work, stormed through the field, and got up into a respectable position. And then again, on the hards, just had no pace. They were slower than the Mercedes, which is a surprise because all weekend long, they've had the better pace than the Mercedes. So, well, from my point of view, I wasn't too displeased with that. However, I'm sure the Ferrari fan who does not look happy at the minute will have something different to say.
I mean, it is what it is. We'll get you next time, hopefully. But moving on to the two Alpines, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, 8th and 9th. I think it is going very well. We're going through team order, one by one. 8th and 9th for Alpine, Ocon and Gasly. Ocon, solid race. Gasly as well, solid race. Started 9th, finished 9th. I don't think they're going to have too much to regret about really there, because their rivals in and around the championship, probably your Haas's, your Alfa Romeos. I was about to say Aston Martin. I don't know why. But Alfa Romeo, they didn't end up scoring any points. Haas only got 1. So I think reasonable weekend once again for Alpine. Kathrin, moving to you.
Yeah, I agree. Esteban Ocon had a good weekend. I think it was good to see him do so well this weekend, given his, I don't know if it was luck or whatever happened in Bahrain, but we'll just move on from that. I think Pierre Gasly had a really good weekend, and it's nice to see him back up as well. It's nice to see that he's found a team that sort of fits what he wanted after his, I was going to say love affair with AlphaTauri, but I don't know if that really works. But yeah, anyway, it's really good to see. And yeah, I do think given their rivals in the constructors, they could potentially finish P4 this season, given the fact that McLaren and Alfa Romeo and Haas aren't doing as well so far. But we are only race 2, so let's not get ahead of ourselves.
P4. Is Ferrari going to drop out? Or P5?
Yeah, I did mean P5. Never mind. I meant P5. Well, I never know. Aston Martin could drop off drastically, but I don't see that happening. So yeah,
P5 it is for Alpine. Moving on to P10, man. Final in the points, Kevin Magnussen. Viking performance, as Gunther Steiner would like to say. Ethan. Overtake on Yuki Tsunoda, as Jolyon Palmer called it, scrumptious. I think it was a very tasty move down the inside into turn one. Both of them outbroke themselves, but he made the move stick and got the final points place, starting P13. So reasonable for Kevin Magnussen. I believe the first points for Haas this season.
Yes, it was. It was a good performance by Kevin Magnussen. I didn't really make too many notes on Haas, but yeah, no, they do very well. He made the overtake eventually. I think he had sort of 4 or 5 attempts into turn one to try and get past Tsunoda, but eventually made it stick with a few laps to go, which was heartbreak for Tsunoda, who finished 11th for the second race in a row. But yeah, no, great performance from Magnussen, and that's the sort of performance that Haas really need. They need to pick up as many points as and when they can, because those top 7, top 8 places look to be nailed on every weekend.
Yuki Tsunoda, the unfortunate man. 11th once again, Kathrin. I think he drove very well. He started 16th, getting himself into the points, but once again falling short. But the AlphaTauri can't get a break, I don't think. He was driving so well until Kevin Magnussen sent it down the inside, Daniel Ricciardo-esque, and got the final points place.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could say that Yuki didn't have a good weekend. Obviously feel for him a bit on the fact that K-Mag got passed, but yeah, overall, I think he had a really good race. He was up at P8 at one point at the start before the safety car. Yeah, it was a good weekend for him. And you're starting to see a bit of an order take shape in the AlphaTauri garage, which I know was spoken a lot about before the season started. So yeah, it's good to see that he's taken the reins with that, given the fact that he was there before, but is the younger driver. So yeah, good to see.
Looking down the grid, Nico Hülkenberg dropped out of the points to finish 12th. Nick De Vries and Guan Yu Zhou 13th and 14th. And the battle for 15th, Oscar Piastri came out on top. I think we have a bit of a talk for the battle about 50 for the battle of the 2 rookies and the 1 experienced driver, with that being Oscar Piastri, Logan Sargent, and Lando Norris. Ethan, in the dying stages, those 3 are battling nail and tooth for 15th place. I don't think many people would have expected 2 McLarens to be battling 1 Williams car, but Piastri came out on top, Sargent in 16th and Norris in 17th. Disaster for Norris. Sargent did well to obviously come back from P20, even though 2 people retired in the end. And Oscar Piastri kind of had to make amends for a kind of a horror show once again.
Yeah, the only reason that Logan Sargent got dragged back into the McLarens is because he tried an overtake on, I think it was De Vries that was ahead of him at the time, and he kind of had the door shut on him. So he had a couple of McLarens right on his gearbox after that. And Piastri, surprisingly, well, Norris got told to let Piastri through, essentially, or not to fight him. I think Piastri might have been on the mediums at the end. I could be wrong. But no, it was good. It was a good little recovery from Piastri. Had that disappointment on lap 1. Seemed to be miles off it, but the safety car kind of closed the order back up. That's one thing that's one team it did help, but they didn't get much out of it. And yeah, Piastri done a nice couple of overtakes on first on Norris and then on Sargent.
To finish off the finishes in Saudi Arabia, Valtteri Bottas. Kathrin, what happened to Valtteri? Poor Valtteri, last of the finishes in 18, just wasn't his weekend.
No, it definitely wasn't his weekend. I had some bad luck and it just sort of got caught up in things, I think. The safety car did not help him whatsoever. And yeah, I think his luck was not on his side.
The same could be said for the two retirees, Alex Albon, brake issues, and Lance Stroll. From what I found out, it was actually reduction in energy recovery that kind of hampered his race and saw him retire from the race. It wasn't anything to do with the engine. It was it was in a sense, but its engine recovery was very reduced, so they decided to retire from the race. But Ethan, I think we touched upon Stroll more than Albon. Albon was running in a lowly place and would have probably been dragged into that Piastri, Sargent and Norris battle anyway. But Lance Stroll, very good from a start, obviously jumped Sainz and then that problem just hit him like that, and it's kind of game over.
Yeah, before that, he was kind of losing a few positions. Obviously, I said before that Carlos Sainz completed the overcut, if you like, by pitting later with the hards not warming up at a great pace. I don't know how much of this is really Lance's fault. I think it's just a random error that can occur at any time. I don't think it's something inherent to the way in which he was driving the car. But is this going to be a problem that affects them throughout the season? Could Aston Martin have a very quick car, but struggle with the reliability side? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, definitely, have to see how they respond in the next race, whether they have to turn the engine down like Ferrari are reported to have done.
That concludes our race review. I think it's time to conclude the episode with some driver ratings. Our lovely new segment that Ethan Evans created. He's loving the concept. But yeah, let's start off from P1 all the way down to P18/P20. That way. Sergio Perez. Ethan, fire me your rating out of 10.
Next
10
one.
out of 10. 10 out of 10. Yeah, I think it was easy. Kathrin?
Also 10.
Yeah, I gave him a 10 out of 10 as well. I think too good not to give him a 10 out of 10. Fantastic race. Max Verstappen, P2 man. Ethan?
Give him an 8. I think obviously he was expected to finish second, really. They had a massive pace differential. Kind of caused the problem himself, starting down in 15th. With that obviously botched first lap in Q2. So it was a good performance, obviously, to make his way through the field, but I don't think it was anything too spectacular.
Kathrin?
I gave him a 10 because I thought I thought that his recovery on Sunday made up for what happened on Saturday. I thought given the obviously the car is of a really impressive rate, but I just thought what he was able to do with the overtakes and sort of similar to what Leclerc did on the softs, and get ahead of all of the other drivers. I thought it was 10 worthy.
Well, guess what? I'll meet you in the middle. I gave him a 9. I think that obviously the recovery was impressive, but his sour face kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. He was expecting to win the race, and he didn't. If he won the race, 10 out of 10. But I gave him a 9.
Yeah, you can't argue with that.
I think I'll stick in the middle there. Fernando Alonso, P3 man. Ethan, what have you given our latest Centurion?
Gave him an 8. I think it was a good performance, but again, it wasn't spectacular. It wasn't as good as his performance in Bahrain, and we gave him a 9 for that. So that's my thinking behind that one.
Kathrin?
I also gave him an 8.
Okay, I gave him an 8.5. So I'll pick you. I think just because he hit that goal of 100 podiums in Formula One, I think it gave him a bit of a half point extra. But it wasn't as good as his performance in Bahrain. I'll give you that one. Moving on to George Russell in P4. Ethan, what have you given your Mercedes man?
I gave him a 9. I'm very impressed by Russell this weekend, and now I'm going to have my chance to speak about Mercedes. He cut me off earlier. I don't
take your 5 minutes of glory.
Yeah, no, I don't know what more Russell could have done, really. Obviously, maybe he could have been a little bit closer to Alonso, put a bit more pressure on, but I don't think the Mercedes had the same pace as the Aston Martin this weekend, to be honest. I think Russell just about maximised what he could. Nobody expected him to put it up in P4 in qualifying, and he did. So, yeah, no, overall, very impressive weekend from Russell,
Kathrin?
Which he needed.
Oh, come
He did
on.
need that. Sorry, he did need
You've
that
done
after
it.
Bahrain.
Kathrin, what have you given George Russell?
I've also given him a 9 because I completely agree with what you said. I don't see what more else that he could have done this weekend, and yeah, don't have the same pace as the Aston Martins, but yeah, overall a really good performance from him.
8.5 from me.
We'll go with the majority then.
We'll go with the majority. You two gave him a 9, so we'll go with a majority. Lewis Hamilton, you can speak about your fanboyism now. Go on, then. What have you given him?
I gave him an 8.
Sir Lewis.
I gave him an 8.
Oh.
I'm a little, I think it, he finished 5th. You can't give Lewis Hamilton more than an 8 if he's finishing 5th. I did just want to point out that he did do 35 laps on those mediums, and that David Croft did say on commentary that the longest stint on that tyre, which was the softs last year, was only 16 laps. So it was very impressive stint from Hamilton, and yeah, his tyres fell away a little bit at the end. He dropped it back from Russell, but it was a solid race from Hamilton, who kind of had his strategy screwed over by the safety car.
Kathrin, what have you given our P5 man?
Do you know what? I'm quite surprised. I also gave him an 8.
Great minds think alike.
Mhm.
I've given him an 8.5. I think I was very impressed with his second stint on the medium tyres. I think he held on to those tyres like a newborn baby. Very good from me. So I gave him an 8.5. Moving on to Carlos Sainz in P6. Ethan, what have you given Sainz?
I gave him a 5. I wasn't too impressed with Sainz this weekend. I felt like he should have challenged Stroll and Russell ahead of him in that first stint, and then on the second stint, the Ferrari was nowhere, were they? And because he didn't have that comeback through the field that Leclerc had, I think that may have been a bit to his detriment. So yeah, I gave him a 5.
Fair. Kathrin?
I said a 6. I must be a bit more generous than that. But no, I think, like you said, I thought he had more race pace during the second half of the race, which helped. But yeah, on Saturday did not work out for him. So yeah.
Also a 6 from me. I mean, I'm not going to be biased. I'm not going to give him a 7 or an 8. Okay, let's be realistic. His Sunday wasn't fantastic. It was just kind of unraveled. Didn't challenge anyone in front, and just kind of had a bit of a steady race. So yeah, I gave him a 6. Moving on to Charles Leclerc in 7th. The more impressive driver of the two Ferraris. Ethan, what have you given Charles Leclerc?
Yeah, that's reflected in my rating. I gave him a 7. It would have been higher if he'd been able to continue that form into that second stint, challenge Sainz, maybe challenge the Mercedes. But as it is, no, I gave him a 7.
Kathrin, what have you given P7 man?
I've also given him a 7.
Wow. You know what? I've also given him a 7.
Yes.
Yes.
So we agree on Charles Leclerc. He had a good race. He got through the order relatively well, but unfortunately couldn't challenge the two Mercedes and Sainz in front. So yeah, I only gave him a 7. Moving on to Esteban Ocon. Obviously, woes in Bahrain, but points in Saudi Arabia. Ethan, what have you given Esteban Ocon?
Well, I think it's the biggest riser from last time out. I gave him a 7. From a 2.5 to a 7 for Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, it was. We kind of hit Esteban hard. Yeah, Esteban.
Nice.
Esteban got it. Yeah. Kathrin, what have you given Esteban Ocon?
Well, I thought I was going to look a bit biased because I am an Esteban Ocon fan, but I also gave him a 7.
Are you serious? We've got it bang on again.
Yeah, I can show you my sheet.
I've also given him a 7. I think again, steady race, better than what he did last time. With the amount of penalties he got, I think he learned his lessons from Bahrain. So yeah, I gave him a 7. Pierre Gasly in the points. Started 9th, finished 9th. Ethan?
Yeah, I couldn't really give a higher grade to either of the Alpines. I know Ocon finished higher, but there wasn't a whole lot of pace difference. So yeah, I gave him the same rating.
Kathrin?
Yep, also gave a 7. I thought Alpine had a really good weekend, and I thought that they were both equally as good as each other. So I thought they should have had the same rating as well.
Yep. Same from me.
This is getting spooky now.
Spooky, scary. It's not Halloween season yet. It's about 7 months away. So I don't know. We might. Great minds think alike. Let's just put it to that. The final points finisher, Kevin Magnussen. Ethan, what have you given K-Mag?
I gave him an 8. I think that may come across a little bit harsh on reflection. But it was a solid performance from Magnussen. He started 13th, he finished 10th, made a few good overtakes. But yeah, no, I think I couldn't really give him more than 8, I don't think.
Kathrin, on the final points finisher, what rating does he get?
Oh, we've done different here. I said 7.
I know I'm going to meet you in the middle. I said 7.5. So we're going to take my 7.5. I think just because he made that maneuver on Tsunoda, I bumped him up half a point. I think just that move alone, 7.5.
Below a 7.5. He finished 10th in a half.
Well, no, I was debating between it was between a 7 and an 8 regardless. But that maneuver just kind of cemented him as a 7.5 for me personally.
Okay.
Moving on to Yuki Tsunoda, finished 11th, was quite unlucky. Ethan, does that reflect on your score?
Well, now I actually want to revise my grade because I gave him an 8 as well, because I gave him the same as Magnussen, but I can't give Tsunoda higher than Magnussen now. So I would like to revise my my grade to a 7.5.
Okay. Kathrin?
I gave him an 8 as well. I just thought his race, and given the whole performance, and the whole weekend, it just made sense. I don't know. Maybe I expect too much from Haas now, but we'll see.
You see, I feel hard done by on Yuki now. I went 7.5 with K-Mag, so I've given Yuki a 7. I don't think I could have given Yuki higher than K-Mag purely on that move.
Yeah.
Well, no, because one got points and one didn't.
Yeah.
There is that as well, but purely on the races alone, you look at it. Sonoda made up more positions, but K-Mag finished on the points, so.
So 7.5 for both.
Yeah. Nico Hulkenberg finished 12th. Quali pace over race pace. Ethan, what have you given the Hulk?
I gave him a 6, sort of midfield mediocrity, really. He was thereabouts. Didn't have the same pace as his teammate in the race. But 12th isn't a terrible result. He was sort of only 3 or 4 seconds, I think, behind Tsunoda in the end. So yeah, I can't be too harsh on Nico.
Kathrin?
Also a 6, same reasoning.
I've given Nico, from my notes, I've given him a 6.5. I think, you're kind of expecting a little bit more from Nico, but from these past 2 weekends, I think he's very largely down to his quali pace. His race pace is not been tremendous, but his quali pace has been very good. So yeah, 6.5 from me.
I think we do just have to, with Hulkenberg, I think we just have to remember he has had, 3 years out of the sport. I know he's come in and done a couple of races for Aston Martin, but it's a completely different car to the Haas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can also agree on that. But you see, he has been in and around an F1 team. He has had appearances there, some appearances throughout the last couple of seasons. So you're expecting him to kind of be race fit, race ready, are you not?
Yeah. But I'm saying for the first 2 races, it's not terrible considering it's both times he started inside the top 10.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree with you. Guan Yu Zhou, 13th finishing in Saudi Arabia. Okay race for me. Ethan, what have you given him?
Yeah, exact same. I gave him a 6. Again, midfield mediocrity. Couldn't really tell you what happened to Zhou in that race.
Kathrin?
Also a 6. Nothing really stood out, but yeah, same.
Yeah, I also gave him a 6. In my notes here, on Guan Yu Zhou, I put sitting duck when being overtaken by Verstappen and Leclerc. That's all the notes that I got from him, really.
I think that might be the only time he appeared on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a passenger. He was a passenger when those two overtook him. Moving on to Nick De Vries. Started 18th, finished 14th. Ethan, what have you given Nick?
I gave him a 6. He made up a few positions, but I think most of them were due to other people's faults. You think about Albon and Stroll retiring, and then McLaren's obviously had their issues, so I gave him a 6.
Kathrin, what have you given Nick De Vries?
I said a 6.5, given the fact that the F2 cars and the F1 cars are so different around the circuit, and the speeds that the F1 cars go, and the fact that this circuit is so quick, and it is his first time in the F1 car around here. So yeah, I gave him a 6.5.
I gave him a 6. I agreed with Ethan. I think obviously he was allowed to move a few positions higher because of Albon and Stroll retiring. So yeah, I gave him a 6. Moving on to Oscar Piastri, P15 calamities on the Sunday, fantastic on the Saturday. Ethan, what have you given Oscar Piastri?
I gave him a 6.5. I think that he had a good Saturday, and the lap 1 incident wasn't necessarily his fault. It was kind of just a lap 1 incident which ruined his race. Came up with a couple of good overtakes at the end. So yeah, I couldn't be too harsh. Gave him a 6.5.
Kathrin?
Same, 6.5.
I've actually given him a 5.
That's a bit harsh.
It's harsh. I after looking at your guys' score, it is a bit harsh. I'll probably bump it up to a 5.5 or a 6. I think the lap 1 incident, unfortunate, yes, okay, but purely on the basis that the poor man just went backwards.
He was last at the end of lap 1.
Yeah, exactly. The poor man just went backwards, and obviously Stroll retiring bumped him up. Albon retiring bumped him up, and he finished 15th. But yeah, I'll give him a 5.5. I'll give him a 5.5. I'll give him
6.5.
Yeah.
Democracy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you win on majority. There you go. Logan Sargent started 20th, finished 16th. Ethan, what have you given him?
I gave him a 6. I kind of want to take half a point off because of that Saturday. It was an awful qualifying session for him. But he didn't perform too badly. He was fighting with the cars in front of him until he kind of slipped back by being a bit overambitious, possibly. And then he got pipped by Piastri in the last couple of laps.
Kathrin?
Also a 6.
I've given him a 5.5. I agree with Ethan's claims there. I think purely on that Saturday, but he didn't set a representative time. He had to go down to the FIA to let him actually start, which they were obviously going to oblige, but still.
I think we do actually have to mention, though, the worst track limits call ever on that, when he put half a wheel over the pit entry line and got his lap time deleted for that. I don't know how much time he gained by doing that, but I do not think it was half a second.
He's still learning. It's his second race in F1. He's still learning.
Yeah.
Moving on to Lando Norris, the penultimate finisher in 17th. Ethan, what have you given him? Have you gone harsh?
I've gone quite harsh. He didn't have a good Saturday. He didn't have a good Sunday. He got beat by his rookie teammate. I've given him a 4.
Do you know what? Me too.
He's the man that's been told has been the best of the rest, but he just didn't act. He hasn't acted like it this season. No. Obviously, that's not completely his fault, but you would expect a driver of his ability to be able to do a little bit better than he's done so far this season, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree.
You guys think you went harsh.
What have you done?
I've given him a 3.
I will concede with 3.
I've given him a 3 out of 10. Absolutely abysmal on the Saturday, awful on the Sunday. Well, apart from that little ding-dong battle at the end, but he still finished behind the two rookies. So yeah, 3 out of 10 for me. He didn't do himself proud, really, Lando, did he?
No.
Especially based on where he should be.
Yeah, not a good time to be a McLaren fan.
Oh, we realistically don't have any McLaren fans in the building at the moment, until we get one.
Yeah.
So
hiding.
Yeah, but at the moment they are. Final finisher. Full stop. Finisher. Full stop. Valtteri Bottas, 18th. Ethan, what have you given Valtteri?
Well, I gave him the same rating as Norris. I just really don't know where it went wrong for Bottas this weekend. I gave him a 4, but maybe that should be revised.
Kathrin?
Yeah, same. I also gave him a 4. Maybe we should also go a bit lower, but yeah, this weekend just did not come to fruition.
3.5 for me. I think, I'm hoping that it's only a one-off for VB, because he's usually a very consistent driver. But Saturday and Sunday, similar to Lando, apart from him getting into Q2, it just wasn't brilliant. Alex Albon and Lance Stroll, the two. Let's start with Alex. Ethan, what have you given Alex Albon?
I gave him a 5. He wasn't performing too badly until he had that fault. But again, he wasn't performing great. Yeah, I gave him a 5. He had a disappointing Saturday as well.
Kathrin?
I actually gave him a 6. I thought he was doing quite well up until the fault, and I think he would have continued doing well and holding his own, which we've seen him do this season, last season. So yeah, no, I gave him a 6.
4.5 from me. I think up until I think he was driving steadily, but I think that fault kind of got him undone. And obviously qualifying 17th, usually you kind of expecting Alex in making a Q2 appearance. I was hoping that he could do that in Jeddah, but unfortunately he didn't, so he gets a 4.5 from me. Finally, Lance Stroll started 5th, got undone by that energy recovery fault. Ethan, what have you given Lance?
I gave him a 7. He had a good start, kind of slipped back a little bit. Couldn't overtake Russell on that first stint, which was a surprise, because you would have thought he would have much better pace. But yeah, no, I gave him a 7.
Kathrin?
Yep, completely agree. I also gave him a 7. I thought he would have had a really good race. I think, given the fact that he was injured in Bahrain and here, and he's still performing so well with the car, I think it's a really interesting prospect this season.
So to end off the driver ratings, I've given Lance a 6.5. I think, same reasons to you guys. I think he had a very good race until that issue kind of got him undone. Couldn't get close to the guys ahead of him. So yeah, 6.5 from me. But that rounds out episode 5 of On the Grid. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me once again as a co-host. Thank you, Kathrin, for joining us as our special guest this episode. We'll be back next week. It's Australia predictions and preview next weekend. Next week, you're gonna likely hear this episode on the Thursday, so we'll probably be recording the episode 6 on the weekend. But thank you for listening, thank you for interacting, and goodbye.